Hello, everyone, and welcome to TFYLP, episode number 329, recorded April the 28th, 2019. I am your host, Deron Land, aka Weird Wolf. Along with me is Lucas Bachman
Hey.
and Jim Black.
Hey, hey.
As you can see, we are on a new day, and this time right now we are on right now is a temporary thing. Excuse me. Simply because of the, I guess I'm attributing today's early broadcast to Thanos, because he snapped his fingers and half our cast is unavailable because of obvious reasons. I have not seen it yet, so let's keep the end game references to the low. I know you've seen it, Lucas.
Yeah. No, I saw it first night, so.
Yeah, I'm my girlfriend and I, we're probably going to go see it Tuesday, because tonight we're recording a Game of Thrones. She works all day tomorrow. I work tomorrow night, and so we're going to get up Tuesday morning. We're going to watch the new episode of Game of Thrones from tonight, and then we're probably going to go see the movie. So I don't know if we're going to see it in the afternoon or in the wait till her daughter gets home and go see it in the evening. I don't know. Probably the afternoon, because it's probably when the best time to go see it. But as such, we are broadcasting an hour earlier than we normally would today. We are now moving to Sundays during the daytime at noon Eastern, 11 a.m. Central, and Jim is trying to be so subtle there, but he's not, we're not doing Ouch My Wallet, Jim, so...
I wasn't bringing attention to it.
Although I'm going to suggest that maybe you and I record an Ouch My Wallet segment after the episode. I know Lucas has to go at noon, but...
Probably could, I suppose.
Yeah. Because we got to get started somehow.
Yeah.
Do you have a minute for a quick Avengers Endgame spoiler story?
Spoiler story. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is just my family.
If Quail Man and Freakazoid don't make it, I'm gonna cry.
What?
So story or whatever. This is just my family or whatever. So I go with my oldest son on Thursday night. Afterwards, I said, make sure whatever you do, don't give away spoilers to the kids at school, because you've seen it, most of your friends haven't seen it. Don't tell them all the cool parts or whatever, right? So, don't worry, Dad, I won't do it and all that. And my wife told him the same thing and all that, right? So my wife ended up going on Saturday morning with my youngest son, right? Unbeknownst to us, my oldest had told all the spoilers to my youngest, right? But my youngest had not said anything to anybody, right? Right before the movie starts, it's about ready to get dark, all right? My youngest son turns to my wife and to her friends and gives away all the spoilers in the movie.
Oh. Right? I would have been so mad. So mad. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I mean, what do you do? They're it's a 5-year-old, so it's they don't really get the concept.
I liken it to I was the one that turned my girlfriend on to Game of Thrones, and she it's not typically the genre that she likes, but I showed her the first episode. She's like, I want to see more. Second episode, I want to see more. She's hooked. Well, as I'm watching it through. I'd already seen through the first, I want to say 4 seasons, and then 5, 6, and 7 were all new to me. Whenever we got the DVD sets, and then we've been idly waiting, or eagerly waiting, I should say, for season 8 to start on HBO. But whenever
that was what, like a year and a half wait.
Yeah, something like that. It wasn't so long, because we finished season 7 like maybe 4 months ago. But 4 months is an eternity whenever you're so invested in the story. But yeah, I'd seen the first 4 seasons, and as I was watching the first 4 seasons, I wouldn't give her spoilers. I'd help explain things that she didn't quite understand, because sometimes the story is a bit hard to follow if if you miss little points and everything, and some of the subtleties. But she was so invested in Robb Stark and Lady Stark. And then the Red Wedding came along, and they started playing the Lannister song in the background, and I'm sitting there, and I knew what was coming, and I looked over at her, and I'm just sitting there looking at her as she's watching, because I want to see, I've seen it before. I wanted to see her reaction, because I knew how invested she was in those characters like that. And she's like, she's sitting there, and she looks over at me, and she's like, "Why are you looking at me?" And I'm like, "Just watch the screen." Like that, and she looked at it, and about that time is whenever she sees, like that, she's like, "No!" She just starts screaming, tears falling down her face, and I'm like, you know, this was worth it. Don't spoil it for somebody. You know, it was worth it. I mean, but I do want to reiterate that we are live right now on both YouTube and Facebook. I don't know if anybody's going to follow us right now, simply because we're at a weird time and we didn't announce that we were going early. But quite frankly, if we didn't go early today, it would have just been me and Jim. And, well, I hate just being...
Yay.
Well, I just hate being two talking heads. You don't get contrasting views whenever you have just two people. We've done that before in the past, and I personally feel that those are the most boring episodes that we've ever had of TFYLP. So I want to have at least 3 people to consider a full cast. So thankfully Lucas was able to join us in today, and while I'm sharing this out to different social media outlets, Lucas, you want to kind of give a little preview of what the topic will be today? I know you were part of that thread, so you might want to kind of go back and glance over it. Transformers new fan, Carrie, this episode is for you. No, we don't have Fans Toys Motormaster. Unfortunately, I don't. I'm going the DX or X Transbots route, actually. So
you had to think about it there for a minute.
Yeah, there's like 3 different companies doing it, and I'm like, which ones do I have? I have the X Transbots one. Yeah, the cheap. I'm going the cheap way. Although I have seen Bobby Skullface's review and Peck for Life's review, and that Motormaster does look hot. I have to admit. But go ahead, Lucas.
So I heard is Fans Toys actually doing 2 trailers for Motormaster? I thought I heard a rumor about that. I don't know if that's
the scuttlebutt that I've been hearing. I don't know if it's true or not, but it seems like it would be true. And if that's the case, and I'm like, why not just do a totally separate piece like the XTB is? You know, so
right. Yeah.
Scuttlebutt.
But
yeah.
What I was going to say is as long as you don't get confused with which combiner you're building when you're ordering the figures.
Right. I wonder how many people is like, oh, they order this Motormaster, and they're like, wait a minute, this doesn't fit with my X Transbots guys.
So
I have a Voyager class torso and Legion class limbs.
Well, they're not Legion class. They're the X Transbots guys are they're probably new leader class size, I would imagine. You know, they're small, but they're not huge.
I see.
And then, or maybe they're not. They may be more Voyager, I guess. And then
but they're a good size.
Yeah, the DX9 ones are probably new leader class.
Okay.
So I mean, they're all rather large. But I went with the X Transbots one simply for the price. I mean, the individual limb bots are about $60, which, you know, for a masterpiece quality or masterpiece size figure that is that, you know, that detailed and everything, and has die cast and stuff, it's worth $60 to me. And then the most expensive part is the leader, and you get all the combiner bits with it, you know, like the torso bit and everything. So it's $120, but that's one figure. That's $120. So I just think economically it works better for me, rather than paying $100 a limb. And that being said, I love the Fans Toys one. I would love to have it. I'm just done paying $100 a piece for them. That's just me though.
I feel like the thing is I mean, I I enjoy all of those when I get them in individually, but ultimately at the end, I'm going to combine it, and it's going to be one figure for me.
Mhm.
I typically don't separate them out. And so then I'm starting to think, oh, well, then it's a $500 figure, not a bunch of individual ones. Whereas if it's $60 a figure, then 300, it's not, I don't know. I somehow justify it. It's not quite as bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of money to spend. And especially if you're doing all the combiners and masterpiece scale, I mean, it's tough to,
Well, I've just got
once
the
you start
Bruticus.
thinking about that.
Yeah, I've just got the Bruticus and the Superion from Zeta Toys, and I'm like, I have no room. You know, I mean,
Right.
if you're watching the video right now, that's the Zeta Toys Superion right there, and that thing is right at 2 feet tall in real life, and the reason I love it so much, I think, is because as a kid, I wanted my combiners to be huge. I remember being so disappointed whenever I finally combined Devastator for that first time. You know, I'm in my mind's eye as a child, I imagined this gigantic toy, you know, even though the individual bots were so small. And then whenever I combine him, he's literally like this tall, you know. And I'm like, he doesn't tower over the other Decepticons and Autobots. You know, I mean, he's barely taller than Optimus Prime. But these guys are huge, they're hefty, and they're beautiful, and they're fully detailed, you know, in both individuals and the combined mode. And like I said, if I go the Zeta route, I don't feel guilty with the high, you know, paying exorbitant prices for them. I mean, it's about like I likened it to buying 4 Voyager class toys and a liter, essentially. You know, and it's about the same, and you're like, and you've got a giant toy once you're done, you know. So,
And I think the other thing too is I mean, now they've finished a couple combiners, and I mean, you can tell that the quality is there and everything too. So I mean, you can have your Superion, and I know I don't have it personally, but I know a lot of people are saying that that's a really good figure as well. And then of course they had designed the original Devastator for Toy World. So
I've got that one too. So
yeah.
So much so that I'm actually considering selling my my Combiner Wars Devastator. You know, I've got it right back here. You can see it on the top of my printer. I've got it down to take photos of it to put it on eBay, and I'm like, I don't want to, but I don't need 2 giant Devastators. And the other and the Toy World one is so much better in every way. You know, so I don't know.
Now, is that the Hasbro or the Takara Tomy?
This one is a Hasbro one with the Perfect Effect upgrade kits, both of them. It's got the articulated arms and individual rifles, and it's also got like the Motormaster cab to get rid of the club foot. Got articulated combiner hands. Yeah. So
Mixmaster?
The Mixmaster.
What did I?
I think it has an upgraded Mixmaster.
Oh,
right?
yeah, Mixmaster. We were talking about Motormaster earlier, and now, yeah, okay. You know what I mean.
I mean, I will still say, though, that Combiner Wars Devastator is still a fantastic figure. I got mine down and was messing with it yesterday. And, you know, I have an upgrade kit on it as well. But, I mean, for the most part, even without it, I mean, especially for the time, I think it's still, you know, holds up, you know, pretty well. I mean, it's no Toy World, but I think it's still an impressive figure, you know, for your collection.
Absolutely. Personally, I'm looking forward to the to finishing the Studio Series Devastator.
Yeah, 2 years in the making. I just don't want it to be another one of the like the what was it, the club combiner that they were going to span out over 5 years, and they wound up like, you know what, after like 2.5 years, they're like, screw it, here's the rest of the bots, you know.
What was that? Nexus Maximus or Nexus Prime? Is that the one?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
They had to change the name.
Tekatron says, I'm starting to run out of space with these giant figures. That's one of the reasons that I'm actually in the process of going through and culling my collection, is I'm literally running out of space. I mean, you can see over my shoulder, I got Terminus Giganticus, and then I've got the Toy World Devastator. I've got the Zeta Toys Superion, Zeta Toys Bruticus. I've got Titan Returns Tripticon. I've got TFC Hades, which is the Lyle Kaiser. That thing's not small either. And then I've got the Titan Returns Fort Max, G1 Fort Max. I've got the Masterpiece Star Saber with the KFC Simba extra figure to make a full victory saber. All these huge toys are great to have, but when you have limited space, it's like, and the thing, I personally would love to have the giant toys. I like the little toys and I like the giant ones. The ones in the middle, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's why a lot of people are going Legends now too. Is they're kind of like us, where they've run out of space, and so you're like, well, if I get these Legends, I could definitely put those on, clear a couple shelves and put those. But yeah, you don't really have a lot of that space for those giant ones.
I mean, I probably could go back to doing the bin life, and just put figures in. I know Peter and Paul are both cringing at you right now, but yeah, I could just like take figures off display and put them in a box and everything and set them aside and display these the ones that I want to for now, and then when I get more room, just bring them all back out of storage. But that just goes against my whole rule of if I can't display it, I don't need it.
Well, that's a situation too where you can also get creative with how you display your figures as well. I mean, like some of the city bots, for instance, they've got like different areas where you can like on Bruticus, you could have Starscream on a shoulder, or Fort Max, you could have someone like Cog up inside one of like the chest cavity. Or even Devastator, like picking up like a smaller figure like over his head, like he's getting ready to throw it, like a Dinobot or something. I mean, there's different things you can do,
and that's
to
another
save
reason.
Space too.
That's another reason I love the little Legend bots that's coming out now. Is that with the big city bots and everything that you have, they display well with those, because it gives you that sense of scale, even though scale in Transformers, but it gives you that sense of scale. It's something you weigh something upon. Yeah.
I was going to say, as far as the only way that I would do bin life is I know I think Randy from Nerd Out does it, where he has a room with tubs or whatever, right? And he rotates his collection. So he'll have stuff in tubs, and then he'll take a Saturday or whatever, every few months, and pull stuff out of tubs, display that, put the stuff that he had on display into the tub. So his display is always kind of fresh, but and he's been in it. But it's, I feel like if you're gonna throw something in a bin, myself, you might as well sell it at that point, because it's like, what's the, like if it's not good enough for your display, like why have it? That's my thought.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the bin life because and we've talked about this before. I mean, I used to do it myself. I mean, I had something like 15 bins. I know it was in the teens of, and I know compared to other collectors, that's not much. But I mean, I had a lot of bins. That's where a good portion of my collection was. And then I had like 2 or 3 bookshelves and an entertainment center in my living room that had the rest of my collection that was on display. And I found that I enjoyed the ones that I displayed more than the ones that was in the totes, because I got to the point where I was actually buying toys that I already had that were in the totes, and then I'd be go to put it in the tote, and I'm like, wait a minute, I already had this. I forgot that I had it because I hadn't looked at it. Yeah, well, try Troop Building Armada Jetfire. I forgot that I had bought Armada Jetfire twice.
And all of them make noise at the same time.
I had 2 of them. I had one on display, one in the bin, and then I bought another one at a store because I couldn't remember that I bought it.
You just barely nudge that tub in the slightest, and pew 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 pew.
Yeah. And forgive me if I constantly scratch my eyes. My allergies are acting crazy lately. But yeah. So on to our topic today. one of our super fans, Carrie, she posted something on her personal page the other day, and I hope she don't mind us kind of swapping the idea for this episode and using it for our topic of discussion. And long story short, she and her mother were having a discussion because her mother is very involved in her collecting, and they they were having a discussion about official versus third party, and we know that this is an age-old debate, and I don't want to really get into is it right or is it wrong, but they brought up the subject. Her mom thinks that third-party figures are fakes, whereas and it diminishes the overall value of her official collection, which she places more value on. I think Carrie disagrees. I'm not putting words in her mouth. That's the way I assume it, because she's the one that bought the toys. So if she didn't like them, then why did she buy them? So that's why I make that assumption. I kind of want to take a look at the thought process behind, are they fakes or not? And when you get right down to it, technically, yes, they are fakes. Whenever you consider the fact that they're unofficially produced, the likenesses are unofficially obtained. They just. But the thing is that they are completely new tooling, original tooling, and in that sense, they're not rip-offs. They're not knockoffs. I think a lot of people misuse that term in our fandom today, saying that third-party toys are knockoffs, and knockoffs are essentially a straight-up copy of an existing toy, tool, or mold.
Making copies.
Yes, making copies. Whereas, you have third parties that they either have a strong tune influence, they have a strong IDW influence, a strong video game influence, like the War for Cybertron, or they have
a beautiful line.
Yeah, or they have a strange or sometimes beautiful mixture of several different aesthetics. They may have some IDW. I know the who is it? Planet X did the Ismenios, their Death Source, where it comes default looking more IDW inspired, but there's an add-on kit that you can buy for it that gives it a G1 aesthetic, but it still has that IDW feel. And I think it works well, but it's a meld of the two. What are your guys' thoughts on it? First of all, Jim, I'll ask you first, since you're blowing on a toy right now.
Yeah, well, I'm just applying nail polish to help tighten the ball joint of an official figure, Studio Series Shatter. But no, as far as third-party items, I've not really dabbled in that too awful much. I mean, in years past, I've had things such as the add-on kit for the G1 Prime that had like the articulated fist and the jetpack and all that. I can't remember what that was called now. I had some of the KFC cassettes of Slam Dance and Squawk Box in the Captured Prey variant, because they were exclusive, and a couple other odds and ends, but nothing major like X Transmots or anything like that. But initially, I was of the mindset of I considered them knockoffs, but as the products have kind of grown and developed over time, and I've seen kind of where they've gone with the different companies and the different items. I'm more inclined to view them as more equivalent to, say, fan art. Like you would have someone that really likes, I don't know, Spider-Man or Deflator Mouse or whatever hero you want to just come up with, right? And they're not actually putting out their own comic necessarily, but they may, sketch their favorite character or a battle scene or whatever. They may post it on Facebook. Okay, that's out in public view. So while they're not directly taking away from the official publication, whether it be Image or Marvel or whatever, it's still their own creation, and everybody else has the opportunity to be able to enjoy it. Or like some folks that like maybe they'll take photos of like battle scenes and dioramas, like you've seen some fans do. They'll like take their figures and recreate the G1 battle scenes from the box
Speaking
art.
of, he just commented down here.
Hey.
It does some awesome stuff. Troy Hahn, he commented. He says, "To me, I don't care who makes the figure as long as it's a good representation of the character I want." And
Right.
also Technotron said, "Value exists in the eye of the consumer." I agree with both of those statements.
That's absolutely true.
I mean, ultimately, the way I see third party is they give me a opportunity to own a representation of a character that I sometimes and this is all isn't always true, but it gives me sometimes a opportunity to own a representation of a character that I ordinarily wouldn't have in a certain genre, like a Masterpiece style. Look how far we've come with Masterpiece official toys, but they haven't even scratched the surface like the rest of the Dinobots, Headmasters, some of the obscure Autobot cars like Skids. If it weren't for third party, I wouldn't have Masterpiece versions of Omega Supreme over my shoulder.
Yeah.
So
although the Titan may change our opinion on that though when it comes out.
Yeah.
So I had actually made that point in Carrie's thread as well. Is that in my mind, I actually think that third party can enhance like the Masterpiece collection. I think part of the reason that Masterpiece took off like it did was because we were getting all of those characters made, from both Takara and both from third party. And I think that like at this point, it seems somewhat obvious to me, considering that they're redoing Prime and Bumblebee and all that, that Takara has no interest whatsoever at making some obscure character. The only way that they would make an obscure character is if they can repaint the thing 5 times. So
Masterpiece rough stuff.
I mean, yeah. So I think that
from MP10,
again, like you said, like the Skids character, or some of these other characters where Hasbro just is not unable to get the license, like a Jazz,
right?
For example, right? But I think that there's a lot of people that I think part of the reason that people in mass dumped their Chug collections and went to Masterpiece is because they're like, hey, I can see that they're going to give me all of the G1 figures that I want in this scale, like scale together, how I want and all that.
And they mesh reasonably well together too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think that would have been there had they done. And I think the other thing too is if you look at it, like, Takara is releasing, since they're doing Beast Wars and Movie Line and G1, they're releasing what, like 2 G1 Masterpiece figures a year, something like.
Something like that.
Yeah, if you're talking original molds, not like I'm not talking like the MP pluses that they're re-releasing, but so I think if I was a collector of that, and I know everyone is different with their collecting, I would get incredibly bored. Like if I was like, well, I guess the Prime's not coming out till August, so I guess I'm not going to get another figure till then. Some people are like that, but a lot of people, I mean, my interest in the hobby would wane if I was collecting 2 figures a year. So, but yeah, so to me, I think the third party in a lot of ways has actually enhanced that, and I think that a lot of the people that are into third party they're going to get multiple versions of the figures anyway. I mean, how many Primes do a lot of people have? How many Megatrons do people have? So I think a lot of because the fact that a lot of these are different figures, different representations, that people are willing to get multiple Starscreams or whatever. So
yeah, and I think this is a good point to bring it out. I titled the name of this episode "Shift Change" because to me it has a double entendre. We shifted the airing of this podcast, the day of this podcast, because my work schedule changed again at work, and we had to shift it to a different day. Well, likewise, I also think it can apply to people's like you mentioned there, the Chug collection was going strong. Everybody was into the Chug line. And if you continued along those lines, yes, you can sort of continue that collection with the Titan Wars and now the Prime Wars trilogy. But some of the scales don't quite mesh. Sometimes they re-release characters in a completely different scale, or something. It just doesn't mesh well. And
like Buzzsaw and Windcharger being the same size.
Yeah, it's sometimes it just doesn't mesh well, and a lot of people, they shifted their view towards Masterpiece because one, you're getting a generally better quality toy, more detail, more overall articulation. I know that's a general statement because some general release toys, I mean, especially in the Siege line, are blurring those lines. But I'm just using that as a general blanket statement. The people want that aesthetic. You know, it's like the ultimate idea of your view of that character, and a lot of times Masterpiece fulfills that view. That's why I shifted to Masterpiece. I was a Chug collector, and then whenever Masterpiece really started rolling, you know, I got the Sideswipe, I got the Prowl, I got the Blue Streak, and I'm like, I'm really digging these guys. That's when third party, you know, started really ramping up their releases for Masterpiece style. And I'm like, hey, I can fill in these gaps. I can get toys of characters that Hasbro and Takara just simply aren't doing anytime soon, if at all. So they help fill those gaps. They help enhance my enjoyment of my collection, like Lucas said. If I left it up to just collecting what Masterpieces they release each year, which at one time was 4 or 5, and then now they're down to like 1 or 2. And then in the meantime, I've just got to collect the mainline stuff, which that's not what I want my main collection to be, is the mainline stuff. I'm not actively seeking that. Yeah, some of the stuff is great, but that's not what I want to collect. I want to collect Masterpiece style, and they're just simply not putting it out fast enough. And third party helps me fill that itch and void, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. So I'll go ahead and go as far as, you know, kind of my thoughts and, you know, get up on my soapbox. So I was telling Duran that I could probably go on for this for, you know, another 30 minutes just on my own. I've been involved in a lot of these discussions. So first off, I do want to say that the RFC, Radio Free Cybertron, had a really good extra episode, and I can't remember off the top of my head which one it is. I'd have to Google it, but where they actually had a guy who was a trademark lawyer come on, who was a Transformers fan as well, and he went through a lot of the various issues, you know, over copyright versus trademarks and all that type of thing. So when we're talking third party, most of these are not being copied. So it's not, unless you're putting the Transformer symbol on, it's not trademark infringement. So you see that with a lot of the third party, like that. That's the reason why you don't see any of those symbols on third party. But copyright infringement, it's a lot more gray area as far as like Hasbro kind of has to bring a suit about it to, you know, before they can, you know, kind of determine whether or not it's violating the copyright. So I think that a lot of the third party, you can kind of like put them into different categories, where I feel like, you know, 5 years ago or several years ago, a lot of the third parties were making figures that arguably, I mean, yeah, like you can kind of see it's Optimus Prime or whatever, but like, you know, like this figure here, like, you know, you could tell this is Optimus Prime, but Hasbro does not have the sole exclusive rights to make a red transforming truck. So theoretically, this might, you know, be okay or whatever. And to me, I feel like this is a totally different representation, right? Whereas, you know, in some of these, like, or you know, this MNC figure.
Here's the it's not the same thing, but here's my allusion to this in an everyday thing. If, let's say, if Bic, who this is a pilot pen, I guess. If, let's say, if they make a patent on this pen, nobody else can make this design pen, but does that mean nobody else can make an ink pen? Nope.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and we can all have a debate about that type of thing. Like this guy, this Make Toys Megatron, like that doesn't look like the animation. It doesn't look like. I mean, you could tell it's Megatron. Like if I'm asking somebody, who is this, they'll know, but it's not. It's not something to where you're like, oh my god, exactly like the cartoon, or that looks exactly like a figure that Hasbro is trying to make. However, I feel like now, and really this is kind of, started in the last year or two, where everyone really wants that, accuracy to the source material. And I think the third parties are really starting to kind of skate a line on that to where, say the new Optimus Primes that came out from Magic Square and the other company, like those, I mean, you knew it. Like you could say that those are really pretty close to the animation, and some of the transformations are pretty close to MP10 and some of that type of thing. And so to where you could, it's possible that they could make a case to say, hey, that these are, accurate. And I think that on some of these that are coming out, I know that the Make Toy Starscream is a good example where you did actually see a case of people replacing their official Masterpiece Starscream with the third party, Make Toys. And in the past, that hasn't really happened very frequently. Most of the time, it's kind of the opposite, where people have the third party, like you said, Duran, as a placeholder, and then once the official comes out, then they'll, oh yeah, right, and that figure's so much better. So
question on that. You've brought up the animation a couple of times, and it has me wondering: is there some kind of thing where the third parties they can't exactly replicate due to whatever reason
sometimes
the
you get pretty
spot
damn
on
close.
appearance of let's say Sunbow animation or whatever?
Look, I use fans,
even though the animation itself isn't a physical, tangible object.
Well, I use Fans Toys Phoenix, which is their Skyfire, as an example. That thing is pretty damn close to the animation. I mean, it's not identical, but then again,
Sure.
the animation in all truth and honesty isn't consistent. So it might match one frame, and then the next frame you're like, hey, that's not on there.
Right.
So even the animation
guess.
is not accurate. But for the most part, you look at the Fans Toys Phoenix, and you're like, man, they ripped that one right off the animation cell.
I guess more what I'm wondering is in a lot of instances, the official Hasbro or Takara Tomy product, the official items don't themselves match the animation either. And so I didn't know if that was still some kind of gray area that
they try. It's, I think even the official routes try to go as close as they can to the source material, but you're never going to get you're never going to get exact, simply because of the inconsistency in the source material itself. But you're going to get pretty darn close and say this is a definitive look of this character. And again, going back to the Fans Toys Phoenix, they just recently released the X version, which is not a whole lot different from what I understand of the first release of Fans Toys Phoenix. It's got a little bit more glossy paint in a couple areas, but for the most part, it's pretty much the same toy. I think the whole reason that Fans Toys went ahead and re-released that toy is because once the Siege Jetfire comes out, I don't think they'll be able to release that toy anymore because it's so close to what they did with Phoenix. It's big. It's animation accurate for the most part. And I think that if they re-released it after that toy, they could be in violation of some kind of copyright. I'm just guessing.
Even if Phoenix was released first, though.
Right. But they have no claim to that character. Well,
they're not calling it Jetfire, they're calling it Phoenix.
Right. But it's all gray area. It's all gray area. We're not... You're trying to take
that's kind of going again between trademark, copyright,
right,
and
Sure.
in patents or whatever. So a lot of that, like, again, none of us are lawyers. It's probably best for us not to, kind of talk too much about that, just because,
Yeah.
again, like, I'm not looking up the actual, code. I think that I think part of the reason that Hasbro, hasn't done it too much in the past, as far as that is concerned, is just because it's very difficult. Most of these toys are made over in Asia. It's hard to track some of that down. And I think, again, the trouble is that if they so they have to go after each individual toy to prove that it violates the copyright, right? However, if they happen to lose, then that would set a precedent, and
they're risking way more. Risk versus reward.
They're risking it. Right. And again, the third party realm is, I know that we're really big into this, but it's a fraction. Like, the amount of product that they're making for, third parties or whatever, where you're talking about a run is in a few thousands, like 5,000 units or something like that, compared to what gets put on the shelf for Hasbro. Like, it's a blip on the radar.
Right.
Really, like, either way, like, they don't, to me, I feel like they don't care. And I think that for them, it probably helps them, like, they kind of get some research and development from it, because they can kind of see, like, how the sales go. They get some ideas for engineering, from it. So, and I think also it kind of increases the fan, like what I touched on before, that, fans, it keeps fans more into the brand and whatnot too. And so I think that they're hoping, even with talking we're talking knockoffs and we're talking whatever, that I think on some of those, that they're hoping, some people, that if they get interested in Transformers in general, that eventually they'll want to buy the official, product itself.
Yeah, I just mentioned it in the chat. Just recently in the news, Lego took down Le Pen, which was probably one of the top knockoffs of their product, and it goes back into the knockoff realm. They were straight up knocking off their product and just changing the name, essentially. I mean, the box art and everything was very similar. The logos were very similar. The toys themselves were practically identical, only it said Le Pen instead of Lego. And it took 2 years in Chinese court for them to finally go in and have police go into the Le Pen factory and shut it down and arrest the people behind the scenes. This was one company from arguably one of, if not the biggest toy company in the world, Lego. Took them 2 years. Yeah, it took them 2 years to take this one company down. Whereas, Hasbro versus third party, and whenever we use the term company, like Fans Toys, X Transbots, Fans Project, all of these companies, so to speak, aren't really companies. They're just an individual group of guys or girls. I mean, I think several of them, the designers, may be girls. So but it's just a small handful of people. Some of them work for different companies and doing their designs. It's nearly impossible to track them down. Their factories that manufacture these toys aren't specifically toy factories. They just run them on the side in a large part. And I know that for a fact with a couple of the third-party companies. So, that's why you get into, and this is the last part of this discussion that I want to talk about, which was also part of Carrie's discussion. But the variance in the different types of factories that produce these toys also account for the build quality on some of these toys. Whereas we get a general build quality across the board with Hasbro. I mean, we still get quality control errors left and right. Shatter was a good example. Some people got a really crappy one. I particularly, I got a good one. It's pretty solid. But some people got crappy shatters. Early in the run, and I don't know if there was a difference in the production of that particular figure or not. Maybe the mold just got better. I don't know, through more use it fit better. I don't know. But Hasbro has its share of crap products. And one of the things that Carrie said is that she finds that a lot of her third-party toys break after some play, and I don't disagree. I think third-party toys will break eventually, especially if you play with them a lot, but you can still say the same thing about official toys. She was saying that sometimes. People who are reviewers or photographers like myself, who occasionally get a early sample. I mean, it's sometimes we get. She thinks that sometimes we got like a really good copy. It's like, here's the best copy we got. Review this. That's not the case. This was simply pulled off the production line and sent my way, It's got the same flaws that you would have anywhere else. I mean, there's a couple areas of sloppy paint. One of the Ghostbuster things on the side is not quite outlined as it is on the other side.
I blame Slimer.
Yeah, this hose right here doesn't quite want to peg in just right. It happens to be staying there right now. I use the MPM-08 Masterpiece Movie Megatron that I have in as an example. Right out of the box, it had stress marks on it. So it's not just third party that has some QC issues. So I think it all stems back to the type of materials it's made from. Some of them flex and bend a little bit more. From my own personal experience of owning certain products, I find I find Fans Project toys to be made of materials that I don't particularly care for, and the designs require you to flex a lot of parts. Sometimes I know the Dino King, there was parts that needed to flex just right. Fans Project Intimidator, which was their Minosaur, that Diesel, the tolerances on it were crazy. I think the breakdown had some tolerance issues of that set. And the plastic they used for it, I could see really breaking down over time and becoming brittle. It quite frankly reminded me of kitchen utensil type plastic. If that makes you have any idea of what kind of plastic it was made from.
That's like Big Lots quality then.
No, I'm not talking Big Lots quality. I mean, it's a good quality. I'm not saying they're putting out
of the plastic.
I'm not here saying that they put out shit toys. I'm just wanting to say that I find that the plastic quality isn't what I deem to be better quality. And a lot of people bash Fans toys for the plastic they use, saying it squeaks a lot. I, for one, have never had a problem out of Fans Toy stuff in the plastic that they have, despite it squeaking a lot.
Plastic that squeaks?
Well, So I think that the funny thing is that a lot of people, throw shade on Hasbro for the plastic that they use, because their plastic is more flexible typically. And so it can hold up to, playing more, with the figure, transforming it more often, all that type. Like, the thing's not going to break. A lot of them are using ball joints too. And so it's like, if it takes a shelf dive or whatever, it's not going to shatter. It's going to flex, and it's going to, hold up, for the most part. And so, ironically, but then I think a lot of people don't like that type of plastic, that they think that they consider it a low quality plastic. Whereas the plastic, like you had mentioned, that Fans Toys uses, I think that their plastic feels more high quality, but I think that it's less likely to flex and bend. And so then if it doesn't do that, eventually it's going to shatter if you take it past, the breaking point. And so, I think that's really kind of the thing is that a lot of people feel like some of these masterpieces and all that are higher quality, but they're more than likely not going to hold it. Like some of the materials too, like die cast is another material that eventually the weight of that die cast is going to, cause issues with the joints and things like that over time. So it's great. Like, when you first get the figure, you're like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing ever. And then 5 years later, you're like, oh, well, this, I know some of the original combiners, like TFC combiners, are that way, that, they can't hold up under their own weight, several years later.
Troy Hahn just put up a great comment there on Facebook, and I think it perfectly exemplifies what I feel about it. Hasbro is meant to be played with. Third party is meant to be for display, and that's how they feel to me. I totally agree with that sentiment as well. I'm not saying that I don't tend to play with my third party stuff much, but if I get a figure down to fiddle with and just mess with occasionally when I'm watching TV, it's usually a Hasbro product, because simply put, if I break it, it's usually easily replaceable, and it's not expensive, and B, I don't care if I break it or not, so much as if I got down my Terminus Giganticus and started messing with it, and oh crap, I broke a knee on it. There went $300 plus down the drain. That being said, was another point that Carrie also said that, and I'm not picking on Carrie, I just think she had some great points here that were good discussion points. And I hope she understands that. I'm not picking on her in any way. Love Carrie to death. But it was that, whenever a figure breaks, through a certain retailer, she's had a lot of trouble getting replacements or any kind of response. And while you would have that with any e-tailer or retailer, it has been my experience that if you have an issue with the third-party product, it is a lot easier to get a replacement part or even a figure, depending on the situation, from a third-party company than it is from Hasbro or Takara. Hasbro or Takara typically does not send out replacement parts, period. Once you buy a toy, it's yours, buddy. Have fun.
To my knowledge, they typically don't have
replacement
parts. At least not for Transformers. Like
they don't.
Monopoly pieces, yeah.
And I use a case in point.
But not Transformers.
My Unite Warriors Bruticus, the box set that I got. I got it from Captured Prey. And I opened it up, combined it. I got home late from work one night, and I combined it. Didn't really notice a whole lot. I just wanted to see it combined. I'm like, oh, this is cool. Well, the next morning I got up in the daylight. I had more light, and I'm looking at it. I noticed that the vortex, one of the rear tail fins on it, was bent up. It literally had come out of the package. I mean, I hadn't done anything with the toy. I just put it in combined form and put it together. I didn't do anything stressful to the toy yet. Literally took it out of the package and combined it. And I noticed that it had a highly stressed tail fin, and to the point that, you just move it a little bit and it's going to break right off. So I contacted Orson at Capture Prey, and quite frankly, it took him several months to get this done, and he couldn't do it through an official source. He literally had to find somebody I want to say Taobao or something other, selling and piecing out a Unite Warriors Bruticus set, and he had to get a vortex separate, and he replaced my vortex for that. Now I'm selling it as a set now, but I've got my enjoyment out of that set, and I appreciate the lengths that he went, and how difficult it was for him to replace a piece of an official toy. Whereas, I've had issues where I had a missing finger off of one of my KFC horror cons. My ape face was missing a finger, and it took a couple months, but I came to a meetup one day. He handed me an envelope, and in the envelope was a little piece of paper with a little piece of tape on it. And inside that little piece of tape was a finger to one of my horror cons. A finger.
That's the most creative way I've ever heard of flipping something else.
Haha.
That's awesome.
But seriously, though, they went so far as to send me an individual digit to a toy. And that was a third party. Your experience with retailers will vary. I will state that, some bigger retailers take a lot longer to get back to you. Some smaller retailers may take a while to get back to you because, quite frankly, they have day jobs. Their store is not their primary source of income. And I know more than one small retailer that is like that. So you got to understand. Sometimes, I see people bitch moaning and complaining about different retailers every day. And quite frankly, I've seen people complaining about Capture Prey before. It's not uncommon, but I can say some people have day jobs. They ship their stuff out, after work, on the weekends, whenever they're not working, what have you. That's when they take care of their stuff, and it can seem like forever if you're waiting on a replacement part or what have you. It's like, okay, I broke a finger, I broke a tail fin on this toy. Can I get a replacement part? Sometimes it can take several months because you're dealing with language barriers. You're dealing with third-party sellers. Not third party, but you got the manufacturer, a distributor, a reseller, and then the final person that you buy it from sometimes. So they've got to go through 3 chains across an ocean to get this one little tiny piece for a little OU. It can take a while.
Yeah.
Well,
I will say this about Capture Prey, though. I mean, by and large, I think he's got great toys, great prices, and great service.
Yes.
but he is human.
Yes.
He
is human.
But he does try extremely hard.
I know that.
I was just going to mention too that a lot of it too depends on whether or not the third party themselves has the parts on hand.
Right.
I mean, if they run out, they run out. They're not. It's not like they can just run a new part for you if they're out. I will say though, a lot of the bigger third parties though do try to take that into account, and they try to have them on hand. I think Make Toys is absolutely fantastic. You can actually send emails to them directly, and I believe Fans Toys is the same way. But they have a direct email, and I've actually done this before. Like for a figure that, like I got a Quantron from somebody, right? That they sold it to me, and it was missing something. The guy sold it to me. I knew that it was missing that, but then I was like, I contacted Make Toys. I was like, hey, do you happen to have this? Whatever, and they sent me the part. So, and that was from a figure that's, it's been out for years and all that. I know MMC is the same way that, I've gotten parts from them and they've been great. It might take, like you said, Duran, it could take, I've had some where they could ship me something right away. Other times where it took months or whatever for them to be able to come across the, the extra part.
Eric Dupuis said in the Facebook comments, says that my Zeta Toys catapult was missing one of the fairing pieces by the vector nozzle on his left arm. It took only a week to get a piece to fix it. And that's great. A week is a really short turnaround, but you also have to consider that figure is still currently in production. It's a current figure. They probably still had the parts on hand. They just probably reached into a bin, picked it out, sent it to you right away. Or sent it to the e-tailer. Or it could be a situation where, like, I know Capture Prey, there's a shelf in his warehouse. I've seen it. I've actually been in this bin where he has, like, replacement parts for certain figures that had problem areas. I know Fans Toys Sever had, like, replacement... I want to say there were spikes or something other in there. Some of the Fans Toys Insecticons. He's got like a ton of kickback wings, because those things broke left and right on people. He's got a ton of them, or at least he did. And Fans Toys knew this, because of, so many people reporting this right away. And I'm pretty sure they sent out a big old bag of, hey, here's some replacement parts for your people. Keep your customers happy. Some manufacturers are like that. They'll do that. Yeah. So
I think a lot of them view it as kind of an investment to keep their customers, because if they if they have the situation come up where there are some broken parts and whatnot as a common issue, and they don't have that could reflect negatively on them.
Mm-hmm. Well, I believe we've brought up some good points here, good argument points, and I'm not sitting here saying we're right and everybody else is wrong. There are other factors that are involved here. Everybody's experiences are different, especially whenever you have differing toys from differing companies. The different ways you use these toys. I mean, whether they be for display, heavy play. Mine I display and photograph toys. And I'll be honest, I've broke toys posing them to display, to photograph. It's an unfortunate happening. I remember one toy I had a couple years ago. I was trying to tilt the foot just a little bit so it would stand right. I broke the ball peg. It happens. It happens. Everybody's experience is different. But, ultimately you got to stop and understand that, these companies, they deal with it the best way they can. Is a third party fakes? Yes and no, ultimately. But it's, as it was stated by a viewer earlier, it's all, the value is all in the eye of the beholder. My personal viewpoint is that it increases the value of my collection because it enhances the way I enjoy my collection. I enjoy my collection more because I have filled these holes through third-party means. I can't do ha 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 ha. I love filling holes. So it's artificial, yes, but at the same time, is Hasbro going to do it anytime soon? Takara going to do it anytime soon? Not likely. And if they do, and I like it better, I'll buy it more. Sunstreaker, perfect example.
Megatron.
Megatron. I didn't buy a third-party Megatron because by the time I'd made the decision, hey, I may buy one, I heard MP36 was coming out. And I'm like, no, I'm just going to wait for it. But... and then there's times like I bought the Light of Freedom, MP44 comes out. I may buy it still, but I'm going to wait for it to drop in price. Until then, I'm going to be happy with my cheaper third-party product. That's just
speaking of third-party products, John. Do you have any idea where some folks might be able to obtain some of them lovely goodies?
We already mentioned that. You already mentioned that earlier.
A brief mention, but not a great length.
Yeah. That's a brief mention is all that's needed because we pound them over the head with it anyway. I believe we need to wrap this episode up. I want to thank everybody that has joined us today, especially at a weird time. We won't normally be at 11 a.m. We're shooting for 12 p.m. noon Eastern time, 11 a.m. Central time for our normal broadcasts from now on for TFYLP. As such, Microcasters is still staying put. Is that right, Lucas?
Yeah, Microcasters will be at the same time Tuesday nights at 10 o'clock Eastern.
And also, if you are a Patreon subscriber, go up there and follow that link at the top of the screen, patreon.com/TFYLP. For without you, our Patreon subscribers, TFYLP would not be here, period. We cannot continue without you. This is not a plea for, give us money. Quite frankly, we would not be here to entertain you and inform you and give us differing viewpoints than you may be not considering through the podcast and Microcasters. You can review. And then if you also subscribe to us on the Patreon, and for as little as $1 a month, you get the added bonus content of TFYLP After Hours each and every month. Sometimes there's 2 or 3 episodes each month. I think we did 4 this month, which yay for us. But there's been some really great episodes of After Hours. It's got a completely different feel from what we do right here on this show, and it ranges anywhere from a half hour to an hour in addition to this. So great content. Thank you everybody for joining us for TFYLP. Lucas, Jim, thank you. We'll see you next time on TFYLP, everybody. Good night.